want to thank you all for joining us tonight, this evening, to see Welcoming the Embrace. We were really excited to have this film in the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. But before we get started, I always like to contextualize the space that we're in and tell people that you're on hallowed ground. This space is important to us. In Howard Thurman's autobiography, he has a quote where he says his dream is to build a structure with state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment, multi-purpose rooms for lectures, galleries, dances. And one of the things that we enjoy about in this space is knowing that we directly met the aims and the dreams and the things that he imagined in this space. That's first and foremost. This building, this 20,000 square feet that we have here, is a lot of those things that fit into that vision. Secondly, I always like to give honor to my professional elders. I like to say that we do not get a Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground here at 808 Commonwealth Avenue without Catherine Kennedy, the former director, the first ever paid director of the Howard Thurman Center, and Ken Elmore, former dean of students here. So I'm happy to follow in their footsteps and continue the vision forward for them as the second ever paid director in the history of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. So I always want to appreciate that. And then third, and speak to the man himself, Howard Washington Thurman, who was the first ever Black person to hold a position of dean of a chapel and is honored underneath the Embrace Monument as one of our heroes as well. Is someone who believed in this idea that meaningful and creative shared experiences can be more powerful than the things that divide us. And so I say that to say I'm happy you all can be in this shared experience with us and really talk about what this film means to people and places is the theme that I take out of it when I watch it and I see it again. So thank you all for being here. I'm gonna read some bios, introduce our panelists a little bit, and then we're gonna find some really fun ways to get them to introduce themselves as well. Because I always feel like reading people's bios don't do it justice. And as someone who's had their bio read before, it always feels weird. It feels like you're talking about someone that isn't me, even if I provide you the information. And I don't know if you all feel the same way.
No, right on point.
And so like, I'm always in that space of like, I know y'all gotta do it, but like, can you not do it? But you need to do it, it's important, but don't. And I imagine everybody else shares some of that sentiment. So sitting to my left, we have Jeneé Osterheldt, the Deputy Managing Editor for Culture, Talent, and Development at the Boston Globe. You have a really long bio, so I'm gonna read pieces of it because I think it's important, again, like I said, to read it, even though I don't know if that's fully who you are, unless you say it is.
Give them to her or.
All right, cool. So,
it's really long.
So listen, Jeneé Osterheldt is a culture columnist who covers identity and social justice through the lens of culture and the arts. Her work centers Black lives and the lives of people of color. She is also the creator of A Beautiful Resistance, a multimedia platform and docuseries for the Boston Globe that centers Black voices and celebrates Black joy. The work is both joy and justice.
Stop right there.
All right, cool. So sitting.
Editor.
Apollo legend.
All right, so sitting next to Jeneé is Gregory Ball, Director of Digital Strategy and Production at Embrace Boston. Journalist, content creator with a career spanning over 2 decades, joined Embrace Boston in 2020 to really enact the vision of Embrace. At the time it was King Boston, right?
Yes.
We'll talk about that because I'm intrigued by that.
I will tell you the whole journey.
And so I'm going to give y'all some highlights from there. He's a highly experienced culture curator, journalist, and content creator with a career spanning over 2 decades. He has contributed to a variety of publications, including the Boston Globe, Boston Magazine, Dig Boston, XXL, and the Bay State Banner, as well as various international editions of the Metro newspaper. He is also the co-founder and editor of KBX Media, a leading digital editorial platform and media content creation agency based in Boston.
That sums it up good.
I'm trying. No, I'm just
Thank
kidding.
you.
Next, we have Austyn Ellese Mayfield. First and foremost, a BU alum, so welcome back.
Double terrier. We don't have like a thing. We don't have like a terrier.
I feel
I
like-
don't know.
You all need something. Some school spirit. Austyn is also a story producer on Welcoming the Embrace and also the creative director of KOS and Creative Media. Mm-hmm. From poet to journalist to content strategist, Austyn Ellese Mayfield has spent her career crafting experiences that move audience to think, feel, and respond. She served as a story producer of Welcoming the Embrace, documentary. She has held in-house creative leadership positions in higher education, healthcare, and nonprofits, and is also the founder and creative director of KOS Media, LLC, a boutique agency offering creative content production and consulting services in multimedia and event production, brand development, and inclusive culture creation. That's everything?
That's everything.
All right. Lastly, sitting up here on the stage with us is, I just learned a lot. I love, my favorite thing about us as Black people is when we don't allow each other to minimize or diminish ourselves. And so y'all are not privy to a conversation we were having upstairs, but that happened where, Dar Adams said, I'm not really all that. And Jeneé said, nah, we're not doing that. So I appreciate that. Dar Adams, native Bostonian journalist, author, historian, and lecturer, work he has appeared in publications such as Complex, NPR, The Emancipator, and the Boston Globe. So that's it. All right, cool. His work has appeared in various online and print publications, including, again, Complex, NPR, Mass Appeal, OK Player, Ebony, Anscape, a publication of ESPN, the Bay State Banner, Boston Globe Magazine, Boston Magazine, and The Emancipator. He is also the host of Dart Against Humanity and the Boston Legends podcast that produces Boston Legends line of apparel. Dart's books include Instead We Became Evil, a true story of survival and perseverance, and the upcoming On Track, The Chronicles of DJ Amir. Can y'all give it up for our panel? So I want to talk about with you all, again, the stories of people and places. The life of Howard Thurman is one of multiple narratives and stories that some folks aren't aware of, they sleep on, but he is someone that is obsessed with how people in communities interact with each other, create further opportunities for interaction, community, and how we share our stories. And to me, this documentary is all of those things, both in plain sight and in the weeds, so to speak, in the gray, if you pay attention. I really want to know everybody's relationship to Boston and what Boston has meant for your chapter of your life. To start.
Dart.
All right, so I was born and raised in South End, Lower Roxbury. At the time I was born, it was Boston City Hospital, and I was Boston Medical Center. I lived at 487 Mass Ave. I could see Boston City Hospital from where I lived. In my community, at the end of my block was the NAACP building when it was still active at 451 Mass Ave. Directly across the street from that was the Harriet Tubman building, which was a community space. It was a community space where everybody went, met, did everything, had classes for the kids, after school program, all that. Directly across the street from me, Ella Little Collins was living. And people would come visit her all the time. People would bring stuff up to her because at the time she was infirmed and in a wheelchair. And everybody in my neighborhood would tell me stories about what my neighborhood was, going back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, who lived there, who did what here. Now, I know when you talk about Martin Luther King Jr. now, he's the drum major for peace and he's a serious man that did all these speeches, but my elders were telling me stories about him hustling pool, playing basketball, playing cards, hanging out with his boys, listening to jazz, dancing and dating Coretta Scott. So I'm like, oh, he was a human, but how come nobody knows these stories? Because they're being told to me by my elders in Boston, but I never read these stories anywhere. Nobody even talks about them in this way. There was an old man who used to say, I can't stand Martin, he stole my woman. Talking about Coretta. I was like, no one talks about this man like this, or that he had a jumper. Nobody talks about this. So I felt like I was kind of being gaslit because people would come up to the little kid and tell him stories like, Sammy Davis Jr. is from here. Yeah, he grew up here, and here. It's like, there's no way. I never read about that in any book. It's like Miles Davis used to smoke weed on the corner and take people's women. I'm like, that didn't happen. So I became a historian and an orator and all these other things because I was spreading the stories that were told to me about Boston that I never heard anywhere else, to the point where I thought people were lying. So I became a researcher just to verify and fact check all the things I was told about my neighborhood and all the Black culture that was in it. But I knew it had to be because Harriet Tubman building directly across the street from me. Harriet Tubman used to visit there frequently. The old Harriet Tubman building was down the street. And also in my neighborhood was Mel King, who ran against Ray Flynn in 1983. And also Alan Rohan Cricht, the man who depicted black life in Boston in living color for the first time, so people could never deny that we were there. And we had WRBB, we had WILD, we had people from the islands and everywhere. So my neighborhood was black, Latino, and Asian because it was spillover from close by Chinatown. So my experience growing up in Boston was this diverse melting pot of culture that mixed with everybody, and everybody was looking out for everybody. Miss Chen, Miss Chan, Miss Johnson, Miss Jenkins, Miss Lopez, we're all looking out for the kids at the bus stop on the corner and everything. So I've never seen that Boston depicted in film, media, anything. So I decided to stop complaining about it and having to explain who I was every time I went outside of the state or outside of New England, and I decided to start telling these stories on my own because be the change you want to see in the world. So that's what Boston means to me. I am who I am because I am a Bostonian.
You definitely can't go first no more.
Yeah, you can.
He can go first.
Can.
Is it me next? We're
Yeah,
going this
you
way?
can.
Okay, so I am a transplant. Boston University brought me to Boston. I was an MLK fellow. I got an MA in creative writing poetry. And then because I was an MLK fellow, I had enough money to stay on and get an MS in broadcast journalism. And that poetry degree and that journalism degree helped formalize how I tell stories. And for me, this documentary, I don't want to say is my penance, but it makes me so happy to be on this stage with you, because when I was at BU, I should have known what was happening, but I didn't, because you're in your ComAv bubble. You go to class, you write your papers, and you don't connect to the city. I didn't leave ComAv really until somebody who knew somebody literally invited me to the cookout. And then I went to Hyde Park and I was like, oh, okay. And then they were like, okay, so now this is Soka, this is where you go. And then this is, so for me, this documentary, one, Boston, I'm from Michigan originally, but I grew up in Boston is how I like to think about it. And you know, I have 2 children. My children were born here, so I'm now the mother of Bostonians, little OFDs, originally from Dorchester. And to have the opportunity to tell this story with the fellowship that got me here and the king that my grandparents knew. They knew him once he was on the ministerial side, because my grandfather was a part of a ministerial alliance and Southern Baptist. And so I have a picture of my grandfather opening up a service in prayer and Martin Luther King Jr. sitting right behind him, right? But I didn't know about his history in Boston for real, until doing this documentary. And it made me sad, it made me angry. But it also made me very happy, because to be a part of this now, to be a part of the work that DART has been doing for years, that Embrace is continuing to carry forward, that Boston University is taking a bigger part in making sure that we're getting more fullness around these narratives, not just around King, but about the Boston that we're in.
Let's see. When I think about my relationship with the city, it's got different chapters. So I was born here, and then when I was really young, I moved to New Jersey, to Trenton, New Jersey, and I lived there until it was about 6th grade and came back. So I had the ability to kind of see the city from a different perspective when I came back to Boston. So I was reintegrated into the city and fell in love with the city as I was growing up again, because I started to see all the things that were special about it. And I think that for me, the film, with the work that we do at Embrace, the key part of it is really about kind of setting the tone for people to see us, to see all of us. And I think that through culture and through sharing through art, that's where you can really start to have that interaction and connection. Dart and I became friends in the hallways of Latin, but then again as adults, but it was around music. And it was that connection through culture that allowed us to become friends. And that has really been the way that, we kind of we've been operating. But as an organization, it's that creating those art moments, those opportunities for people to connect around the music, whether around the culture, whether the piece like this is the catalyst for conversation or it's the catalyst for people to connect. So that's really been kind of the driving force for me. But in terms of being a Bostonian, I feel like, I will say to this, we were having this conversation upstairs earlier about the whole idea of kind of being connected to the city. So I blame y'all, but I don't blame y'all if you're not connected, because, we're a town masquerading as a city in many ways, and our interaction is like that. And you got to know somebody. You just can't just breeze up in some place. That's a piece of it, though. That now, on the other side of it, though, there also is the responsibility to kind of like, if you're here, go explore. Now, don't go everywhere. Go get you a guide, but go explore. Like, one of the things that I would, as a college student, being on BU's campus is strange, because normally when I was here, it was like at night at a party inside one of these rooms. But one of the things that would always drive me crazy is when I would hear people from out of town say, well, there's no black people in Boston, there's no black culture here. Like, you can't say that if you don't go past Comm Ave. Like, you can't say that. You can't say that with any honesty. Now, granted, like I said, I know Bostonians are not the easiest group of people to warm up to, and that will necessarily, but I say to people that Boston is kind, not nice. So we're gonna help you out. We're gonna talk trash about you while we're helping you. Okay. Hey, dummy, come on, let's just fix the flat tire. Why are you just driving over nails? But I'm gonna help you fix the tire.
There's a whole black neighborhood on that side street right there. You just been right here. All you do is just turn a corner.
Exactly. So when it comes to Boston, I think there's a lot for you to connect with and explore, and I hope that you were able to see some of that within the film.
So I'm not really from the town, but I love the town. I'm from the area. I'm from the 703, 202, 301 era of the DMV. And I'm proud of that. But I deeply love Boston, and I throw it down for this city. I felt called to be here. I first came here in 2016 to Harvard, and I didn't do a lot of in the city exploring then, because the program that I was in was so rigorous, it demanded a lot of our attention. But I luckily knew Dart. Dart was one of the earliest readers of a blog that myself and Jacques Slade and Jazare Allen Lord made called Nerd-like. And he was such a profound thought leader to even have him be a fan of us or reading us or talking to us. We were just like, this is so dope. And he was also like the most proud Black Bostonian I had witnessed outside of like New Edition. So when I got here, I told him immediately, like, oh, I'm here, I'm at Harvard. And we got to connect a few times, and he took me on one of his legendary Black Boston tours. And then I left, I finished my program, I went back to my career. Like Greg and Dart, I've been a journalist for some decades. I drank from the waters of Lake Minnetonka. I know it don't show. But
it's the aura.
It's the aura.
It's overwhelming.
It's definitely overwhelming.
But I left, and then about 8 or 9 months later, someone slid in my DMs from the Boston Globe on Twitter and wanted to have a conversation, and they had read my work and really wanted my voice at the Boston Globe. And I hadn't considered moving here. Even my time at Harvard, I was here with 23 other journalists from around the world, and they did a tour of the Boston Globe newsroom, and I opted out. I was like, I'm not interested in going to that newsroom. But here was this editor in my DMs, like, let's fly you out, come see what's up. And I did, and something really spiritual shifted in me, and I felt like I needed to be here, not because I could save Boston or I was some great gift to the city, because that's not what I believed. I believed that my journalism was needed for both me and the people I knew to be here liked art. Because I was like, why are these other voices that I know to be here not getting these types of opportunities and shine and spotlight? So I just hit the ground running. I moved here knowing that, like, I don't know if I got this, but God got me. And I'm supposed to amplify the stories of the people who are here doing this work. Not that I'm coming in doing new things. I'm coming in here to pass the mic and amplify them. And I'm just so thankful because DART welcomed me back with open arms. G reached out to me. It's like I met so many people, and I'm sorry, I put the onus on you. I don't like when transplants are like, there's no Black people here. It's a quarter Black. It's 20% Latino. It's about 9% Asian. This is a city primarily made up of people of color. And if you don't know that, it's because you didn't want to know that. It's because you're attending school and you're not living here. And that's okay if you're attending school and not living here. What's not okay is to judge the people who do live here. It's not a fair thing to do. It's not right. And it's great to have a guide, but I actually didn't call DART to take me around when I came back the second time. I called DART to link the second time. I did the legwork to go meet Jessica Pierre and all these other people who had yet to become the famous people they are now in the city. I put them on the front page of the paper. I did the exploring. I followed in his footsteps, because that is the duty if you're going to really live in a city and say you live here.
So, and y'all are kind of getting a peek into a conversation that happened upstairs, which actually changed my entire direction, by the way. I wouldn't acknowledge that. In the documentary, it's speaking about this idea of a love letter in several different ways. A love letter to honor Martin and Coretta Scott King, a love letter to honor Black people's relationship to Boston, and also a love letter that is somehow reconciling some of the things that have happened to Boston, right? It's the significant piece in the documentary speaking to why it's important to have this monument, not in Roxbury, not in Dorchester, but in the oldest public park in the country, on that land, in that greenery where often, as you all heard, where Black people weren't seen, weren't allowed, didn't exist to some folks. And so I'm curious, first and foremost, from Austyn and Greg's perspective, about was that the ultimate vision of the documentary, to tell this sort of story of a love letter, particularly a Black love letter to Boston, or did this project morph into that?
No, I could say from the beginning, that was the idea, because Beyond Measure and Austyn, they really took the lead from what we were doing as an organization. So, like you said, the idea of where we placed the monument, it was funny, in the aftermath of when the monument was unveiled, there were just so many narratives, and it was driving me insane, because I was like, that's not true. This stuff was thought out, it was on purpose, it was put in America's oldest public park on purpose. It was put on the Freedom Trail on purpose, so that you can't deny the existence of Black folks in this city. And you're forced to look at this monument to Black love in the city of Boston, where you say that we're not at. You know what I mean? So that all of those things were really done on purpose. And then the film kind of grew out of that. So when we came up with the idea that we were going to do a long piece, because we had worked with Beyond Measure for a few films. They do our Voices on King series that we do every year, where we have thought leaders kind of have conversations around Dr. King and his ideals. When we started kicking the idea around about doing a long form piece, that was the thing. And they built off of what we had already laid down in the foundation as an organization.
Yeah, it was totally a both and in terms of that, because there was when we first started, they're like, hey, Austyn, we want you to be the story editor. I'm like, this is great. And they're like, this is the story. And as we started doing the interviews, I was like, yo, that's not the story. And the wonderful, even having, Nick and Dart, and as we were putting this together, at first it was this, it's like, yeah, Boston's this like gritty underdog. And I was like, that's not the that's not the clips we have. And I love being on this panel with fellow journalists. I was like, no, the story is telling us the story right now. And that love letter and the passion, I mean, there's so much that got left on the cutting room floor. Like, we have 15 hours of interviews, close to it, I think, and getting that down to 42 minutes, and, you see Marie, talking about, we're here, we are not our pain. And I think the story at first, we're like, oh, we're gonna show how we climbed. It's like, no, we are succeeding. Here are the things we're continuing to knock down. But the love letter part really came out of what we heard from the voices, because even in the critique, in the demand for accountability, like Jeneé said, there's so much love. Like, people are here because, not just because, oh, I'm born here, oh, I came to, grad school here. It's like, no, I'm supposed to be here. I don't know where else I would live, unless I leave the country, I don't know. But like, no, I'm serious, I don't know where else I would live, other than Boston. I think that's, that direction came from the stories. And I think Embrace had this vision, like, yeah, we want to tell this uplift around Black love, not just Crispus Attucks died here. Look at the Glory Monument, right? And that's why I'm like, I just want to spend so much time with you, because there are living historians. There are other people, Byron Rushing, right? Real quick, raise your hand if you knew that Roxbury tried to extricate itself from the city of Boston, and there was a really big movement to do that. See, a lot of hands not raised. I didn't know. Yeah, Roxbury was like, we're done. Let us go, please. But these are the stories, right? And like, I didn't know that until Byron Rushing told me. I've been here for 15 years, right? So there's a deep love and appreciation, and there's a lot of stories that are still out there.
I'd be curious to hear from Jeneé in this aspect. Your work at the Boston Globe, plus your platform, A Beautiful Resistance, I think also too, is an aspect of you telling a story or stories about love, about Black love, love of different identities, et cetera. But particularly some of the things I've seen is specifically you trying to find ways through those platforms or through your life to also tell your own version of a love letter to Boston. Could you tell us more about that?
So, Boston is not a white city. It is a city that is guilty of being complicit in narratives of whiteness and white supremacy. And America, I think, has taken delight in using Boston as its like stepchild of racism and supremacy. Like, Boston is the racist city. It isn't the whole country. It's not in the air. It's Boston. So the narrative.
Y'all got the cooties too.
Exactly. Everyone has the cooties. It's in the air. Like, if you are under the sky, you are washed in various levels of privilege and supremacy. That's just true, no matter what your identity is. But because of that, because of everyone's willingness to be complicit in these lies about who lives in Boston and who the city's for, it got me thinking about the lies we tell ourselves about who we are and how we start to believe the lies we're told about who we are. And like Austyn said, like, there's this, and I don't blame our ancestors. I know everything they did is a product of their own struggles and fights to help us get liberated. But there is this thing that happens in our families and in our communities where everything is focused on pain, holding it in or getting it through, and it's just all the stories are told through like violence or suffering. And I got to a place of like, if we believe this about ourselves and we're allowing everyone else to believe it about ourselves, we're denying ourselves humanity. We're complicit in the way we almost eat at our spirit. So journalism and storytelling is a way to be restorative and healing of that, to give us back our fullness and our richness. So A Beautiful Resistance, my writing in the Boston Globe, the way that I amplify Native Bostonians and transplants alike is really about taking that power back, standing in our full truth, and understanding that if you only tell a story through the lens of pain and violence, that's not honest, because that's not how we live, really. Not even our most oppressed and impoverished are living in pain 24/7. It's just not who we've ever been as a people. We are people who deeply delight in loving one another and being in joy. We are also unserious. Look at Twitter. So, it's about giving us the freedom of that joy and love.
I appreciate that. I also recognize Dart as an OG from Twitter. And I would be honest, my introduction to Black people in Boston is actually through Dart's writing. So I'm actually honored to share the stage. And I remember seeing the first cut of the documentary actually at the Roxbury Film Festival. Shout out to those folks, because that's the reason why this all manifested. I knew when I saw it then that I wanted to see this in the Thurman Center as well. Why do you love on Boston so much, so passionately, so continuously, and so thoroughly? And why do you feel like that's your responsibility?
My dad used to say something, somebody got to do it, I nominate me. And I got sick of hearing everything coming at us or me, and I was like, I'm from South End Lower Roxbury, and all the kids from Roxbury, the Roxbury kids that raised me, my parents, my family on both sides, both from Slocum and Dothan, Alabama, from Montgomery County, Alabama, and from Tegucigalpa in Honduras, San Pedro Sula in Honduras, were like Puerto Cortez in Honduras are like, fight. Don't let anybody tell you who you are. You tell them. Don't let anybody dictate anything to you. Don't let anybody define you. And I would hear from people, like when New Edition were blowing up, that they would go to MCA, and MCA would like, try to tone down being from Boston. We're trying to sell y'all to Black folks. We want people to love you. We want people to love you, and Black folks don't love Boston. And every time I saw a TV show, and again, I was born in 1975, so I'm growing up in the 80s, in the late 70s and the 80s, and I'm seeing depictions of Boston, and I don't see us. Meanwhile, I live in Boston. I go to Boston public schools. There were fewer and fewer white kids every year I was in the Boston public schools from the 1979-80 year on, until I realized, oh, there's fewer white kids every year, because in Boston, we have this thing where you're in advanced classes starting in 4th and 5th grade, and in the 6th grade, you're in your last advanced classes year. And you could take what's called the Latin test, the ISEE, to get into either Boston Latin Academy, or at the time O'Brien or Boston Tech, what have you. And I'm realizing, oh, there are no white kids in the Boston public school system anymore after busing, because their parents take them out and they put them in private schools or parochial schools. But I see white people in my neighborhood, but I see fewer and fewer and fewer as time passes. But when I watch TV and Boston TV shows, those classes are full of white kids. And maybe there's a few Black kids sprinkled in. I'm like, this is a polar opposite in my existence. So growing up, I was like, if I don't tell these stories, if I don't tell people how it really is, they're going to continue to believe these lies and this misrepresentation of my city. And the thing is that when I would tell people about Boston, especially Black folks all across the board, they were like, I feel like you're brainwashed. Like, you've been a hostage, Stockholm syndrome, and you believe these lies about Boston. It's like, no, you're the one that's being brainwashed about Boston. So it just got to be a thing where people would just pile on Boston, hadn't been here for a day, going off third and fourth hand information. I was like, I live here. I'm here. If you want to ask a Bostonian, ask a brown person from Massachusetts, ask somebody from New England, damn it. So I just felt like it was my responsibility to do it, and I didn't feel put upon doing it, because who else was going to do it? Just do it. Do the job. So I had to go extra hard, because I thought about, If you're from Brooklyn, you say Brooklyn, everybody's like, oh, cool. If you're from Chicago, you say you're from the South Side of Chicago or the Wild Hundreds or whatever, people accept that. If you're from Harlem, cool. If you're from Houston, what ward you from? If you're from New Orleans, everybody accepts all that. But if a black person says they love Boston, all of a sudden you're up in arms and you have an issue with that. Why? Why? And you're not going to tell me to not love where I'm from, because the reason I'm even in this space is because I am from Boston. I was told all these great things about Boston. I experienced them. I didn't imagine it. So that's why I do what I do.
There's a change, right, from, and I will admit participating in this project it enabled me to see Boston in a different light. I'll admit to being one of those people recruited here to work here, and that's all I came here for. And I'll admit to being one of those people when you told your family, like, yeah, I'm moving from Baltimore to Boston. They're like, why?
That's why I had to start doing my tours, because people are legitimately scared, frightened for their relatives to come to Boston. And they were like, I think they're gonna be spit on and yelled at and called the hard R N-word every day of their lives. I'm like, bro.
Yeah, that's only on Thursdays.
If you want to learn more about, who's like, oh yeah, the purge on Thursdays, the purge on Thursday. No, if you want to learn more about DART's tours, Google search "A Beautiful Resistance" Dart Adams, and you'll see a whole episode of one of DART's tours.
Yeah, proud plug, not shameless plug.
I'm not shameless.
Right. So I say that. So this project really it opened me up, because we were talking about earlier, and I was talking to Austyn earlier. There's some cutting room floor pieces of my portion of the interview. You air it. I'll be honest. I'm a hater. I'll be straightforward and honest. I'm a hater because to give it context, I came here in 2019, right before a global pandemic. So I just didn't have the opportunity to explore this place, and we're filming this in 2022. No chance to really explore Boston to its fullness at that point. And then seeing this film and the Roxbury Film Festival and seeing the reaction to it, it helped me understand why there was a need to shift in the direction of the embrace. Why that we go from King Boston to Embrace Boston. But I'd love to hear you, Greg, really expound upon that a little bit, why there was a need for a name change from King Boston to Embrace Boston.
Well, a few things happened of why that happened. So to go back, we had to start at the beginning. Originally, the idea to do a monument to the Kings was not something that started in 2017. It actually had been tried a couple of times. And for those of you who don't know, one of our most famous mayors, Thomas Menino, he was known for building stuff, like all the stuff that you're seeing, the seaport and all that stuff really started under Mayor Menino's watch, and he wasn't able to even really get that all the way to the finish line. So in 2017, one of our founders at what is now Embrace really asked the question, like, why is there no monument to Dr. King in Boston, kind of considering the story? And when he came back to the city, he had been out of town, and he came back to the city, he had connected with Reverend Walker and Reverend Brown, and that was really the start of it. So it was originally MLK Boston, because there was going to be a monument to the Kings, but then as things kind of progressed, it was like, well, the unique part of Boston in the King legacy is this is where they met. So then it went from being about Dr. King to be about the both of them. So then going from there, after we finished the monument, then the thing was like, what is the next step? The idea wasn't just to build the monument. Originally that was, but as we grew and started going through the process, it really became about like, how are we building an organization that's really making an impact on the city? So after the unveiling, it was just thought like we're gonna have to change our name, one, to keep going, but also, the Kings have a legacy of their own, and we didn't want to kind of even be in a position where it seemed like we were taking it. They were gracious enough to be able to allow us to use the name King Boston as we were creating the monument. So that's, once that it came to an end, it just made sense for us to continue on. And to, you know, we were inspired by that first big piece, which was the monument itself, the embrace.
I'm going to ask another question, but I do want to make sure we have time for audience questions. We have some wonderful folks who will run around with microphones. So if you have a question, get your question ready. Austyn, I really want you to talk about your time spent interacting with a lot of the folks that are featured in the film, helping to tell the story. Because again, like, I will admit, my tide has turned. I don't see Boston in the same light as I once did. Some of that actually is the conversation that happened in that room, which people don't see stuff like that, right? And it's my first time meeting Greg. And if you know me, you know I'm always down to be a fly on the wall. So I'm just listening to conversations, and so it shapes my perspective. But I'd be really curious to know what you learned throughout this process of interacting with people to tell the story.
I mean, for me, journalism, poetry, all of it has always been really highly relational. And for me, being able to have personal conversations, like, I have questions, but when we sat down, there were one or two things that I wanted to ask you, and all of you too, but you got to let the conversation go, right? And the great part about, you know, being a story editor and being the one asking the questions, like, this wasn't a got you interview. It's not like, tell me what you think about Boston now. No, it's just like, no, it's like, tell me about your experience. Tell me about, and I feel super blessed because I just got to do my favorite part of the journalism and I didn't have to do the color correction, you know, yeah, other people doing that, but to be the first holder of the stories and to watch people respond to someone genuinely asking, what's it been like for you to be Black in Boston? One of the questions we asked everybody was, you know, complete this. Being Black in Boston is, and we have answers to all of those, and not all of them are in there. I was so sad. I'm not gonna tell you because you might use it for content. But we asked, you know.
We are going to do the Snyder cut of this film.
Can I help?
Can y'all take all the
Thank
stuff
you.
of me hating out though?
Right, no, but there was one part, especially with you, like, again, as a transplant, you know, we talked about what is the role of higher education in what it means to be in the life of a city.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
We did talk about that. And you were not a hater. You were extremely honest. And that's why, again, what we're doing right now, what we're doing tonight, is a part of the responsibility. Like, this film should be shown at all, 350? Like, we all need to talk about, you know, what does it mean to be in Boston when you come here to learn? What are you learning? What is the role of higher education for the students? Again, you know, they're never gonna let me back again. You got pilot payments, you know, it's like, so pay in lieu of taxes. You're not paying taxes. How are you investing in the life of the community if you're keeping your students like this? It's not possible. It's not possible, and that's not hating. That's the responsibility of what it means to learn, to educate yourself, to encourage education, like, writ large, right? Because there is a vested interest, as Jeneé was saying, right? If America started here, and we keep showing Black people, that's confusing, but this is, right? But there is a vested interest in, no, this is a super white place because America started here and this is a very white country. It's like, well, no, that's not true. We gotta tell all of the stories of the people who are here, right? And so I think listening to everyone share their stories and, you know, speak honestly, because I was very grateful that people trusted me with these stories, about what the people who live in Boston, all of us, regardless of your identities, can be doing and maybe ought to be doing to better understand the place, the realities of the place, not the curated experiences, but the realities of what it is to be a Bostonian for however long.
Two things I want to throw in there. One, I think part of the reason that they felt so comfortable is that you have that aura But you also have this energy that draws people in, and you were having legitimate, real conversations, and that's where I think they were comfortable, and they were just, you really were tapping in it and opening it up, opening people up to just feel free and feel comfortable. So I think that's one of the reasons why I love working with Beyond Measure. They do an incredible job at every piece of it. And when we talk about that, the whole idea of the love letter, so with Noah, his vision, like there's a reason why everybody in this film looks beautiful. Like it was done on purpose. That was all part of the thought process for people to see something that they normally don't see. The only other place that I see continually where people look this good are in Beautiful Resistance. Like those, because it's a care to be able to show you, hey, this is what we really are. This is what we really look like. This is what we really feel. And you know, it was interesting. It was something that you said at the beginning of the film. This is good. This is good. Don't get nervous.
It's really not that hate. It's really accountability more than anything.
No, but at the beginning of the film, you talked about how when you came to Boston, the Black experience had all these different sectors where you could go to a cookout and you would hear all those different things. And I would say to people, like, you know, if you want to know the city, go and explore and see the city. Like where y'all at Carnival? We have like there's certain things that are just pieces of information. Like we have the third largest Haitian population in the country. Yep. We have one of the most diverse. I want to say it's second most diverse Black populations in the country. We actually, Embrace Boston did a report about a year ago called The Great Migration, The Great Immigration, that talks about the relationships and how mixed this group of Black people is in comparison to the other places around the country. And one of the things that's beautiful about that to me, I have this conversation with people, I feel like, you know, because we have all these schools here, because we have this unique group of Black people here, we actually have the pieces to really kind of solve and break down a lot of our problems, not just here, but all over the country and all over the world. You know what I mean? You could have people who have all those experiences. And, you know, just the idea of even thinking from a Pan-African point of view, like we can always reach and touch and connect with one another. That's something that we can do here in Boston. Like Boston, you know, our president and CEO, who was in the film, talks about it all the time. He talks about how Boston is one of America's storytelling cities. Like this is where you come to learn about America, which is why, going back to the whole idea of why we were being in the America's oldest park and being on the Freedom Trail. Like we wanted people to see us. And also to claim that, in addition, not just to show people who are coming to the city, but also to claim that space for us. You know, when I was a kid, you really didn't go and hang out in Boston Common. Like there was really nothing down there that you wanted to connect with or that even made you feel comfortable or welcoming. You know, we were hoping that this would be the first of many things. And the beautiful part about, since the monument is open, or has been unveiled, is that we started to see people connect and congregate there. So when the SAG was on strike, when they had their protest, they did it at the memorial. These are the things that we just knew were going to happen. And you see people who are, you know, bringing their kids. And the piece that we're talking about, obviously the memorial, but the piece that I'm super excited about, which is the Boston piece, is the Freedom Plaza. All those names, all those people are people who are essential to the story of Boston. And you can't really tell the story of Boston without those folks. Some of them are still here, some of them are gone, but all those stories are incredible. And it's, so when people say, oh, I don't know where Black people, no, they're right there. And these are the people who made the way for all of us today. So.
And you can read about all of those living people whose names are on the Freedom Plaza in the Boston Globe all month long. We did an entire celebration series of them.
I want to go to the audience for questions.
Let's do it.
Hello, comrades. Hi. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Nick, for making BU do these types of events. We have long discussed the invisible barrier between Black Boston and the largest university in this city. So thank you for really chipping away at that. There's so many questions and directions to take this. I want to know you all's thoughts, as it's in the news right now, the reparations task force with the mayor, and how that situates into really talking about a discussion about what has not happened for Black Boston. So Boston is a really curious town, and that, to Jeneé's point, this is a minority town. I hate the term minority anyways, majority people of color town. BPS is certainly majority students of color. And yet that segregation is not a matter of minoritizing people. Apartheid South Africa had overwhelmingly Black people, and it was a hyper-apartheid state. So there's something that did not happen in Black Boston that happened in the Chicagos and happened in the DCs and the Detroits, et cetera, in terms of a generation of Black power that I don't want to discredit the people who are actually doing it. The Mel King's, his book, if you all students have not read, what was it, Chain of Change? We should just buy that book for the center, actually.
We can do that. That's
We
easy.
can, because it's hard to find, it's out of print, so let's just do that. So to my point, Mel King, who I always think of as the unofficial mayor of Black Boston, like a John Wesley Dobbs figure for this city, it didn't seem like the turn happened in the Black power generation in which Black Boston actually got political power. Economic power, I can understand, as many cities still struggle for Black economic power. But what happened in this city in terms of Black people? I don't think we can confuse that there is absolutely a vibrant Black population here, but do they have power?
Well, I think that is something that is coming into place more and more now. I think that there was a level of I'm struggling for the word, for lack of a better word, of maturity that was necessary in order to execute that. So I think that we're now getting to that place where we're seeing, our city council president being in place, where we're seeing the mayor being, like, those are changes that have been long overdue. And I think that we are getting to the point where those things are coming into play. But I also believe that it was a fragmenting of that power, that it was some of the difficulties of people kind of being at odds with one another, of sometimes in those situations where people want to be the one, you know what I mean? And really kind of, Mel King was unique in that he crystallized a lot of support around him because it was him, because of his relationships, and everybody hasn't been that magnetic kind of person. But I think that more and more, as you've seen over the past few years, we're seeing that change, and we're seeing people who are understanding how the halls of power work, and they're really active in being in those places. So I think that we're late to that party, but we're at the party.
One of the issues too was that with Mel especially, Mel was one of the people that really dove into the idea of what the Rainbow Coalition was, largely because of where he was, in the South End, Lower Roxbury. Mel King was my neighbor as a kid. He was my friend of my mother's. And Mel was right there in the South End, Lower Roxbury, which is right next to Via Victoria and Iba and Chinatown. So all of those people were organizing together. And they got things done with housing and schools. The schools I went to versus my older cousins and other family members, they were dilapidated schools that were falling apart. That's why the Boston Freedom Movement happened in the 60s, and you had the Freedom Stay Out. It's about to be the 60th anniversary of the 1964 one on February 26th. I was writing a piece about it for the Emancipator. And all the schools were dilapidated. The newest one was made in 1937. Some of them went back to the 1890s and early 1900s. And when I was coming up, all the schools were new. The Blackstone, the Quincy, the McKinley. All these schools were built in the 70s right in my neighborhood. And the housing was relatively new, built on new parcels. So what happened was there was this space of time from the 80s and the 90s where there was a lot of apathy. A lot of people saw a lot of things weren't moving. And so they kind of didn't care about politics, so the Byron Rushings, the Bruce Bowlings were still in office trying to get people, no, invest in this, invest in this. And it wasn't until probably, I say the late zeros, the aughts, where we started seeing people realize that, oh, the only way for us to change things is to get into local politics. And there's been a real switch from like the tens to now, where I had friends that were just like doing whatever, and then they've said one day, you know what, I have to get into local politics, I have to organize, I have to do X, Y, and Z. And now I see them on TV and they're in the State House and in the Senate and doing all these other things, and I'm just like, I'm old. But also, it took a while for that to happen. So I think we're going to see that changing in the next 3 to 5 years. And it took, I think we lost about maybe 15 to 20. That could have been, I mean, if we could have had that happen sooner, it would have been.
I would argue it's been happening the last 5 years, and it is only going to get better and better over the next 3 to 5 years. The representation that we're seeing, like you said, in the state, in the Senate, the city council is the most diverse it's ever been in the history of Boston. The mayor's cabinet, it's not just that we have a young Asian mayor, it's her cabinet is the blackest cabinet in the history of Boston. It's also one of the most nuanced cabinets. I would put it up against a lot of major cities for the very intricate nuances that exist within the identities and the ages there. I would also speak to what Greg said about this being one of the second most diverse population of Black folks. The primary identity, in most cities across America, most major cities, the primary Black identity is descendants of the American South. That is not the primary identity of Black folks here. And I think there was a time where and I didn't live here, but just from the research I've done, from the people I've talked to, there was a time where Black Boston mimicked DC and Atlanta and other places where you see segregation among the Black population. Like the Black American South fucks with each other, the Caribbeans fuck with each other. It's like all very segregated. And Boston once operated like that. That is not how the elder millennials and younger are operating now. Like when they were in high school, from the reporting I've done, they operated that way. But over the last decade, they have amassed a level of intersectionality and collective liberation mentality that has allowed the type of changes that we've seen over the last 5 years that will only get better and better over the next 3 to 5, as Dart said. And I think we're right at the intersection of promise and possibility, of who we were and who we believed ourselves to be and what is possible, what we can do. And it's not perfect, but when I go home, back to the DC area, when I go visit my friends who live in more visibly Black places, what I don't see is the type of collective community that exists here. And when they come visit me and they see it, the way I'm jealous of their brunches and their day parties, they're jealous of the rallying of community we have. So I would say that we have a different type of power that positions us in a place of possibility that a lot of places that might seem more progressive still don't have.
Well, listen, I've been here since '05, so 100% the reporting you have done, absolutely, because I used to have folks come up to me and start speaking, Haitian Creole, and when I was like, oh, I'm from Michigan, they're like, okay, bye. Because again, and then I also think there was a time when young Black folks from Boston were like, yeah, I'm gonna get up out. I can't do this anymore.
Absolutely.
And now those of us who stayed and those of them who may have come back, they're like, wait a second, no, I'm tired of leaving here to try to do something else. And I think I think some of that connection that you're talking about is folks that are like, no, this is my time. We're not leaving. We're not going. And we're going to, run for office. We're going to set up, cooperatives. We're going to found businesses here that represent us. And you're not going to push us out. You're going to try, but you're not actually going to do it.
Yeah. Another question from the audience?
Hi, all. Do you feel like as writers and journalists that being in Boston has changed the way you tell stories at all?
I wouldn't tell stories if I wasn't a Bostonian. If I wasn't from Boston, I guarantee you I would have had a regular job and no one ever would have heard of me. quite literally the reason I exist and I write and I research and I do all the things I do is because I was born and raised in Boston, or where I was born and raised in Boston with my family. And that really affected everything about me, and it also affected how I saw blackness across the diaspora and everything else. When you grow up in an environment where you turn on WILD first thing in the morning, you hear reggae, soca, calypso, you know, and then you hear soul, R&B, and you go outside and it's all reflected in your neighborhood. You turn a corner and you hear like Latin hip hop, freestyle, you know, and then you turn another corner and you hear Boston space funk, and you're just like, oh, this is how it is everywhere. No, it isn't. When you have LGBTQ folks in the community who've been there forever, and there are people that left where they were from to come to your neighborhood because it's the only place they see a rainbow flag. When you realize when you get older, that was a unique experience. When you grow up and you go around the corner and you talk to somebody who tells you about the organizers in the 60s and the 70s and what have you, and do you know this happened right there at that building, and this woman was right here, and at the time somebody's going to go see Malcolm X's older sister, the woman who gave him the money to go to Mecca, and you find out that that place that you went to, your record store, Skippy White's, was actually one of his old hangouts, you know? So that is a unique experience. Or your boy lives 2 doors down from where Martin Luther King Jr. lived when he went to BU. So it is a very unique experience growing up in Boston and telling stories. And again, I go back to being told that Sammy Davis Jr. grew up in my neighborhood and the only reason he left Boston is because he got drafted by the Army in 1944, or being told that, you know, Quincy Jones used to live on Pembroke Street. Without all that, I'm not a writer.
I think I would throw in there also that the personality of the city, like I think, and it's not to say that any other place doesn't have like an allegiance to the truth, but I think because we have kind of this either underdog mentality, or we are not, our stories aren't amplified, it becomes that much more important that we tell them, that we tell the story right. You know, I was trying to think of around the time when the New Edition miniseries came out. Oh. I remember somebody saying like, "Oh, I thought they were from New York." What? No, like that is blasphemous. Like and. It really is. I think that it's just so, there's something ingrained in you when you grow up in the city or when you're in a town where it's just like, there's like, oh, we have to tell it like it is. We have to tell, we gotta, you know, you're so used and many times of being erased or things like that, that you almost get to the point where you're like Dart and you're screaming it at every moment. You know what I mean? So it's those opportunities that, or that energy is kind of what drives that whole like, for me, what is like, oh, I have to tell the story the right way. I have to tell the story right. And then also, there's an accountability that comes from being a Bostonian, because if I don't tell it right, then somebody's gonna give me a call. Or if I don't tell it right, I'm gonna run. Like I see the people, you know, that's why this film was important to me, because I know that, you know, my family was gonna see it, you know, and people in my community were gonna see it. So. And they were going to be like, you know, listen, I love you, I appreciate you, I'm glad you got this job, but that movie's trash. And so when you know that energy is there, it's something that kind of is in the back of your head all the time, like, oh man, I got to make sure this thing is right.
I was just going to add, Jeneé can add on to this. For me, I'm not in the active journalism part, but for me, it's always so interesting to see when new journalists, be it broadcast or print, come to Boston, and you can tell they haven't figured out that they're not going to tell Boston about Boston yet. There's like, well, this story, and there's these cute turns of phrases, and I was like, And then 3 years later, you see that same writer writing much better and telling much better Boston stories, because this is not a place, to your point, that tolerates, like people just won't read your stuff anymore. They won't talk to you. So I think for me, it's made me, I think I've always been like connected to truth, but also understanding, again, that relationship and that trust building. Like Boston, I feel like Boston doesn't really play that well with folks that try to.
Well, that's one of the reasons why she's a superhero.
Right.
Like, and one of the reasons why, like, and Jeneé will tell you that one of my first conversations with her, I think, was like, oh my God, you're one of my favorite writers, because she was doing that. Mm-hmm. Like, she hit the ground running with that energy already. So she brought, that was in her. She didn't, get it from the town. She brought that in the town. It was a perfect match. And one of the reasons why I love to read her writing all the time, or anything that she creates or produces, is because I know that truth is going to be there. Mm-hmm. She is not going to BS me. I know that I'm going to get exactly, and it's going to be told with love and passion and truth. Those things are going to be interwoven into everything that she does. So that's,
You're making me blush, stop. It's very uncomfortable.
It's the aura.
I did hit the ground running. I was a journalist 16 years before I moved here. I moved here in 2018, not entirely different from Nick. I lived here barely, but just about a year when the global pandemic hit. I think my experience is different because I did hit the ground running and running with my arms out, like full ready to love, but also I got hands if need be. And that's also Boston's language. Like they are kind but ready. So I think we understood that about each other right away. What I will say about my journalism in Boston is, while I already was doing this type of work, and my voice has always been my voice, there's footage of me at 18 years old, literally, there's a whole lot more motherfuckers involved, but literally speaking how I speak now with the same mission. But I think how Boston has changed my journalism is that it has opened up something in me that is so wildly, deeply rooted and committed to doing right by our community and being in community with our community, even if it means I am out of the light so that they can shine. And that has allowed me to do some of the best work I have ever done in my 22-year career. So I will, even if I one day leave Boston, I will leave so proud knowing I gave my all while I was here and did the best work I possibly could at every moment. And I don't get to write as much anymore because I'm in leadership. And that's sad for me as a journalist and a creative, but it's also important. And I make the sacrifice because it's allowing me to set up enough voices in our newsroom so that it doesn't have to be just me or Adrian or Renee. There's lots of us now telling lots of stories, and it's creating a structural change that will go on to outpace and outlive me. And that is important journalistic work.
Yeah. Do one more.
Hello. So I have a statement and a question. So for full transparency, I'm also a transplant. I'm definitely from New York, and I don't mean like upstate New York. I don't mean like the $1 million buildings in New York, but I'm from like the boogie down Bronx, New York, and from its ghetto neighbor Yonkers as well. And with that, I definitely, when I applied to come to BU, which also I'm a student journalist as well, but when I applied to come to BU, I definitely did not really want to come. Like, my idea of it was, I definitely was in that bubble that you mentioned of the ignorance of thinking that it was white Boston and that I'm not going to feel like connected to it at all, And when I came, I still had that idea. The only reason why I did come is because I knew that it has good representation. I can get that paper and I can do what I love and move on, But when I came, it still told me the same thing, because as you said, it is a bubble as well, and you're stuck here and you don't see the real Boston. But I got my own Black Boston tour one time, and it definitely opened my eyes to like the reality of the people that live here. And I was like, wow, like I actually feel like I'm at home. Like, it started to look like my neighborhoods, you know what I mean? And so with that, I definitely see the importance it's very important for documentaries like this to be shown, and for people in the neighborhoods, like growing up in Boston, and people that grow up in Boston in more of a white Boston, not understanding that there is more to Boston than what they have. And also to the people outside of it, outside of Boston, because I think like just the media in general obviously portrays the whole idea that, like you said, Boston is white and that's just what it is. And I think it's very important for us to realize that most communities, most places have multiple communities, period. Like in New York itself, many people think that it's either you're in the ghetto or you're just in the rich part, but there's parts everywhere, you know, in every borough. And so my question is, what do you, like, how important do you think it is? I know you've already spoken on it, but a little more from your own words on the importance of Black media for all of those communities, for the communities that are in it, that are like, why am I not being portrayed in the media? For the communities that are right outside of it, don't even know those communities exist. And then for the communities in the nation, period, in the country, to understand a reality and a narrative that isn't portrayed in white America. And yeah, and more specifically even the Bay State banner and what you think that importance is of, a newspaper that shows that embraces that empowers that, and how important you think that is to you and the community of Boston.
So when I was approached to be in Murder in Boston by Jason Hayer, who did The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, he jumped in my DMs. I'm like, this is fake. I checked the name. I'm like, oh, no, that's really him. So he says, so you want to meet? Because I know he's from Massachusetts. He's from around here. And I was like, and I know he knows a lot about like basketball and stuff that I lived at. I was like, yeah, we can meet. Sure, okay. So when we meet, the very first thing I say to him is I watched this ESPN documentary, Celtics versus Lakers, Best of Enemies. And Magic Johnson said, people came up to me and they said, we don't even root for the Celtics. We from Roxbury. We root for y'all. And then it cut to something else. And I was like, so they didn't ask any Black, Latino folks from Boston to get their take? Okay, cool. And then I flashed back again. I'm telling them, I was like, I was watching when the Red Sox finally got over the hump and beat the Yankees in 2004. First they did a documentary, HBO did a documentary called The Curse of the Bambino. Then they did Reverse the Curse. I was like, so y'all did this documentary twice, and the only Black person they spoke to was my boy Howard Bryant about Fenway Park being, hostile to Black folks. I was like, I grew up in the South End, Lower Roxbury, where we had the South End Neighborhood Baseball League, where we had the Boston Astros. We were baseball crazy. Like, half of my neighborhood was Latinos from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. I was like, all we did was talk about baseball. I was like, they didn't talk to any of us. We have Jim Rice Field down here. We have the dude who was the El Tiante, Louis Tiant Field down the street. You didn't talk to anybody in the neighborhood. Boston, Lower Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan about baseball? So I'm telling him that. And I'm saying the reason is because we will tell our story. But when you leave it up to white media, we don't exist at all. So when they put out their story, it further perpetuates the idea that we don't exist. So that's the importance of Black and Latino and Asian media in Boston. We will tell our stories because we're champing at the bit to do it. And so when I talk to him, I'm like, if you're gonna tell this story, you gotta tell it from our perspective, because we're the people that always get shit on, we're the people who always get overwritten, we're the people who always get forgotten. And he looked directly at me and he said, that's why I called you. And that's something I got from growing up reading the South End news from Black and Latino writers who were in the neighborhood, something I got from having the Bay State banner in my backyard, something I had from down the street. There was a guy in my neighborhood who did a magazine called Black History is No Mystery. It was the only publication like that. He was 3 doors down from me on Mass Ave. Going to IBA, Iloquinos and Boricuas in Action. Having people who look like me, look like my aunt, look like my cousins, and the people in my neighborhood who were community leaders, who were journalists, who wanted to tell these stories. And they were super important in shaping my idea of what the full story is. And without that, I don't know if like I understand what the totality of media is and representation really looks like. So it was super important. And the fact that like the Bay State banner still exists, you know, is mind-boggling to me. And that Greg was one of the people who brought me on years ago. And it was the first time I got a byline and I could show my family, oh, I'm actually doing it as a writer because here's a physical thing with my name on it. And I'm actually part of this continuum that you respect.
But you know what, even beyond, it's funny you say that. So I had, up until the point I wrote for the banner, I had, I'm trying to think I had been in the Globe. Yeah, I had been in the Globe before. So that kind of got me some love with my family, my grandma and folks like that. But when I was in the banner, when my name was in the banner, I actually was a journalist. And so all this foolish writing stuff that I've been talking about actually made sense to them, because it was something that was connected to them on a regular basis. It was a source that they trusted. So to answer your question about the importance of those voices, yeah, we absolutely need those. We need that wide range of voices. So we need Jeneé to be in the Globe offices, but we also need the banner to be strong and to be telling stories and lifting up and growing and building as well. So we need that diversity in voices in a variety of communities, not just in the Black community. We need those because, you know, mainstream media has had the opportunity to get it right, and they haven't, and they continue to get it wrong. So, you know, you're not going to continue to tell a lie about me when I know, you know, that the truth is really out there, and we can fill in those blanks. We can give understanding. We can give context that sometimes, you know, so stuff like Travis Kelce invented the fade doesn't happen. If you had a Black friend, you would know that was not real. You know what I mean? But that's why it's super important to do that. You know what I mean? And also, it's Black media and just media outside of the mainstream is essential to like all of our growth.
Yeah, I have two things to say. One is just like a shameless plug, and also me being just proud in the town. I love HBO Murder in Boston. Read all the fine credits. Much of the work is also informed by the last 2 years plus work of journalists at the Boston Globe doing deep corrective research to make sure the story is told well and told right and held account to the problems that everyone in the media helped contribute to in the past. So I want to uphold, listen to the podcast that was made here and read the work that was done here that helped inform that work. You know, I work for the big guy. I work for the Boston Globe. In my entire career, I have worked for the big guys. I have worked at the big institutions. It is essential to have the Bay State banner. It is essential to have El Mundo. It is essential to have the Chinatown papers. It is essential to have French Creole radio stations. If we don't have independent media, if we don't have media that is for us and by us, we do not have full control of how our stories are told. I will always root and champion independent media. It is incredibly important. I believe all tools of the revolution are necessary, which is why my career looks how it looks. But I will always have a deep reverence and respect and understand the importance to fight for our independent media siblings because they are our counterpart and often our corrective.
And I would just add, not just Black media, but Black creators across media. So, you know, people like to, you know, crap on like TikTok. No, be on there and correct the people. You know, whether you're blogging, resharing, there are still a lot of, you know, entrenched like diversity of the diaspora, like Caribbean Fashion Week, right? Let's go, share, repost, be there, right? So that as you're learning, you're like popping that bubble. I'm so glad, just like come out to Dorchester, let's roll. Like let's do it so that these things don't get stuck in the silos, because especially in independent media, not everybody can cover everything, you know. And if you say, like, you know, call the banner, be like, hey, you know, I'm happy to, you know, pick up a extra piece, right? Get involved in the creation of media that is actively telling stories. If you're if you are in comm and you're a lighting person, know how to light folks, right? Other than Matt Damon, right? So just learning how to be the best, most diverse, entrenched storyteller you can from your experiences changes everything, and we need it.
Before I hand off the thing, I just wanted to say that I definitely felt the same way. I just recently, in the past semester, had my first publication, my first and second, and it was actually to the Bay State banner. Yay! One was thank you. One was for Starbucks and about gentrification in Hyde Park with that, and the other one was about Kitty's Corner and the whole child care desert that we have. Oh, wow. Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you guys just for what you guys do in general in your fields and have been doing, and I definitely look up to you guys, and I'm just want to say that I'm definitely looking forward to being right there next to you.
Thank you.
Listen, that's a great way to end that. I want to thank you all for coming here to talk about this idea of loving on Boston and loving on our people here in Boston. Thank you all for being in attendance. These folks didn't have to come here. Again, this was an idea of, we just really wanted to show the documentary, and then it morphed into this idea of folks graciously giving us their time to be here to really speak about their work and the impact that this film can have, and then also the Embrace Memorial as well. So thank you to you all for really giving that to us and to our community. And then for those that are from BU in our audience, I've been giving this challenge out to Boston, and I've been saying at everything we've hosted, Boston, the city of Boston, beyond Comm Ave, to say that there's a reason for you to be here on BU's campus, and if you can count on anywhere to be your home, then the Thurman Center is that. But the reverse is also true for us here in Boston, and we had this conversation upstairs. I'm in the middle, but I do think if you're here at Boston, you should know more about Boston than Comm Ave. You should journey south, not west, not east. I'm gonna tell you to journey south of campus to really experience more in Boston. I'm gonna challenge you to do that and to expand your bubble, maybe pop it a little bit to really learn more about Boston before you make those judgments that many of us transplants have made about this place. So we have food outside as well. I hope folks stay around a little bit for the reception. Karon's not in the room right now, but we do have food outside for you all as well. So thank you all again for coming.
Wait, before y'all go, Boston While Black, look that up. Black Owned Boss, look that up.
BAMS
The
Fest.
Teachers Lounge, look that up. BAMS Fest, look that up. Look up Light Work Events.
Silk R&B, you just told me about that.
Silk R&B, and those will all help you get a running start at what it looks like to go beyond this campus and in the people who really are from the town.
I like slaves. Should we send the babies to slaves?
Can't ask me. I think everything is safe.
All jokes aside,
The
fried,
bombest chicken wings in this
I'm a
city.
vegetarian. Y'all need to go to slaves.
the bombest fried okra in this city is at Slaves, and also go to Hugh. Go to
yeah.
Hugh.
They can't
Go
You have both
to
sides.
go to Estella. Go to Blue Nile.
Zaz.
Go to Zaz. Like
Nubian
go to
Markets.
Grace by Nia.
Market.
Comfort Kitchen,
It's there Friday, you know what I'm saying?
Bites,
Rhythm and Raps.
Rhythm and Raps,
Yeah.
Bites. Yes.
So,
Right
write
there.
all these, we can end now. I know y'all want to eat, but he
Follow
gave,
them
he
on
gave
Twitter.
y'all a
I gave
task,
up.
so I wanted to give you a little bit
And
of a
Ali's
cheat
location.
sheet. A little
Just
cheat
be aware of the door, because sometimes the door's heavy.
No, you gotta have somebody go with you to get rotated.
That's what I about to say. I don't know about all that.
So,
dirty.
so
Like,
thank
they
y'all
need a
for
friend
coming.
to go there.
And then I'm about to stop.
We gonna stop right there.